Hey everyone, welcome back to my tech channel. I hope this series of iOS interview questions and answer is helping you to prepare for your technical interview. This is the fifth part and same as my previous videos, it contains 15 interview questions. I have mentioned links of part 1 to 4 in the description section below. Kindly check there. So without any further delay, let's start. Question number 61. What is class? So, a class is a set or category of things having some property or attribute in common. A class is a blueprint or prototype for creating objects. So, basically, a class consists of properties and methods. It is similar to structures in the C language. The class can also be defined as a user-defined data type, but it also contains functions in it. So, the class is basically a blueprint for an object. It declares and defines what data variables the object will have and what operations can be performed on the class object. Next question, what is object? So objects are the basic unit of object-oriented programming. They are instances of a class which have data members and use various member functions to perform tasks. Next question, question number 63, OOPS concepts. So let's see one by one. First one is abstraction. Abstraction is the concept of hiding internal details and describing things in simple terms. For example, a method that adds two integers, the internal processing of the method is hidden from the outer world. There are many ways to achieve this abstraction in object-oriented programming, such as encapsulation and inheritance. Now, what is encapsulation? So, encapsulation is the technique used to implement abstraction in object-oriented programming. Encapsulation is used for access restriction to class members and methods. Access modifier keywords are used for encapsulation in object-oriented programming. For example, encapsulation in Swift is achieved using open, public, internal, private, file private keywords. Now, polymorphism. So polymorphism is a concept where an object behaves differently in different situations. There are two types of polymorphism, compile time polymorphism and runtime polymorphism. Compile time polymorphism is achieved by method overloading. Runtime polymorphism is implemented when we have an is-a relationship between objects. This is also called a method overriding because the subclass has to override the superclass method for runtime polymorphism. Now, what is inheritance? So, inheritance is the object-oriented programming concept where an object is based on another object. Inheritance is the mechanism of code reuse. The object that is getting inherited is called the superclass, and the object that inherits the superclass is called a subclass. Now, what is association? Association is the OOPS concept to define the relationship between objects. The association defines the multiplicity between objects. For example, teacher and student objects. There is a one-to-many relationship between a teacher and students. Similarly, a student can have a one-to-many relationship with teacher objects. However, both student and teacher objects are independent of each other. Next is aggregation. Aggregation is a special type of association. In aggregation, objects have their own life cycle, but there is ownership. Whenever we have a relationship between objects and ownership, then it's a case of aggregation. And the last one is composition. The composition is a special case of aggregation. The composition is a more restrictive form of aggregation. When the contained object in the has a relationship can't exist on its own, then it's a case of composition. For example, house has a room. Here the room can't exist without the house. So the questions which we have seen so far in this video are really very important for your technical interview. Regardless of your experience level, maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, you will face this interview in most of the cases. It's my personal experience as well. Let's move on to the next question. It is, does Objective-C supports inheritance? So Objective-C allows only multi-level inheritance. It can have only one base class but allows multi-level inheritance. All classes in Objective-C are derived from the superclass NS object, and Objective-C does not support multiple inheritance. Next, question number 65. Does Swift support multiple inheritance? So the answer is Swift doesn't allow us to declare a class with multiple base classes or superclasses. So there is no support for multiple inheritance of classes. A subclass can inherit just from one class. However, a class can conform to one or more protocols. Next, question number 66. What is method overloading? So it defines a method with the same name many times with different arguments. This kind of feature is known as method overloading. Next, question number 67. What is method overriding? So if we define a method in a class and we know that a subclass might need to provide a different version of the method, when a subclass provides a different implementation of the method defined in a superclass with the same name, arguments, and return type, that is called method overriding. Next question. Does Objective-C supports method overloading? So no, Objective-C does not support method overloading. These are very common questions, but you will definitely face in your interview if they will start with the oops concept or like basic questions. So you will face this kind of questions. And sometimes we may get confused even though we have implemented this scenario multiple times in our code base, but still we get confused sometime. That's why I have included such questions in this video. So the next question is, does Objective-C support method overriding? So yes, Objective-C supports method overriding. Next, question number 70. What is property? Property. An object's properties let other objects inspect or change its state. The goal of the property directive is to make it easy to create and configure properties by automatically generating accessor methods, which are getters and setters. Next, question number 71. List attributes of property or different property types. So the first one is atomic. It is the default behavior. If an object is declared as atomic, then it becomes thread safe. Thread safe means at a time only one thread of a particular instance of that class can have control over that object. Totally opposite to atomic, the non-atomic one. So non-atomic, it is not thread safe. You can use the non-atomic property attribute to specify that synthesized accessors simply set or return a value directly with no guarantees about what happens if that same value is accessed simultaneously from different threads. For this reason, it's faster to access a non-atomic property than an atomic one. Non-atomic is used for multi-threading purposes. If we have set the non-atomic attribute at the time of declaration, then any other thread wanting access to that object can access it and give results with respect to multi-threading. Now, what is retain? Retain is required when the attribute is appointed to an object. The setter method will increase the retain count of the object so that it will occupy memory in the auto-release pool. The setter generated by synthesize will retain the object. You will need to release the object when you are finished with it. By using retain, it will increase the retain count and occupy memory in the auto-release pool. Now, copy. If you use a copy, you can't use retain. Using a copy instance of the class will contain its own copy. Even if a mutable string is set and subsequently changed, the instance captures whatever value it has at the time it is set. No setter and getter methods will be synthesized. A copy is required when the object is mutable. Use this if you need the value of the object as it is at this moment and you don't want that value to reflect any changes made by other owners of the object. You will need to release the object when you are finished with it because you are retaining the copy. Next, read-only. So if you don't want to allow the property to be changed via the setter method, you can declare the property read-only. Read-write, it is the default behavior. You don't need to specify a read-write attribute explicitly. Next property type is assign. It will generate a setter that assigns the value to the instance variable directly rather than copying or retaining it. This is best for primitive types like NS integer and CG float or objects you don't directly own, such as delegates. Assign is somewhat the opposite to copy. When calling the getter of an assigned property, it returns a reference to the actual data. Typically, you use this attribute when you have a property of primitive types like float, int, boolean, etc. Next property type is strong. Strong is a replacement for the retain attribute as part of Objective-C automated reference counting. In non-ARC code, it's just a synonym for retain. Next property type is weak. So weak is similar to strong except that it won't increase the reference count by 1. It does not become an owner of that object but just holds a reference to it. If the object's reference count drops to 0, even though you may still be pointing to it here, it will be deallocated from memory. Example of strong and weak. So we can use weak with delegates, outlets, subview and controls, whereas remaining everywhere use strong, which is not included in weak. Next, question number 72, copy versus read-only. Copy and read-only are attributes of property. So this is a kind of question which you may face in an interview, like by combining multiple properties. One is this copy versus read-only. Then you may face strong versus weak. Then you may face like strong versus retain. That's why I have included these kind of questions as well. So let's see, copy. It creates a new copy of an object, so it creates a new object. Once the new object is created, it increases retain count by 1. You use copy only when you need the value of an object as it is throughout your application. So it won't be mutable. So you won't be able to change it. In what is read only? So as the name says, the property is read only. It will create getters only. No setter will be created for read only property because you cannot set any value for a read only property. If you try to change the value of a read only property, you will get a compiler error. Next, question number 73, copy versus strong. So copy, again the same definition, it creates a new copy of an object, so it creates a new object. Once the new object is created, it increases retain count by 1. You use copy only when you need the value of an object as it is throughout your application, so it won't be mutable, so you won't be able to change it. Now what is strong? So it increases the retain count by 1. It creates the getters and setters. Objects will be mutable. You change the value of this, you can change the value of this strong object. Next, question number 74, weak versus strong. First, let's see weak. So it will not increase the retain count, so it will not have a strong reference point for that particular property. So the property which you are creating with a weak attribute, it will be easily deallocated. So it does not protect the object from being deallocated by ARC. On deallocation, weak objects will be set to nil. This is why weak properties can be optional. Weak also creates getters and setters. Now strong, so it increases the retain cycle, it increases the retain count by 1. It cannot be deallocated by the ARC. It creates setters and getters. An object will be mutable. And the last question is, explain the frame and bound of a view in iOS. So bound is a rectangle that is relative to its own coordinate system with 0, 0, and the frame is a rectangle that is relative to its superview. So this was all about this video. I hope you have already subscribed to this channel. If not, please subscribe to get notified of my upcoming videos. Also, these same questions are available on my website as well. If you want to read instead of listening and watching this video, then you can go there. I have added the blog link in the description section. Thanks for watching this video. I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.